Hello, Whovians, and welcome to the wonderful interviews. Yes, they are back once again in glorious recording fashion, where the record button definitely 100% always gets pressed. And so today, I'll crack straight on due to the fact that if you want to see my previous interview, it's on my main channel. There it is, that way. Obviously, it's not a physical thing you can touch. You can press it on a rectangular screen. But we are back with more wonderful interviews. My guest today is best known as one half. Well, I wouldn't say half, one quarter, shall we say. But my maths is horrendous, so I don't know why I started that analogy. But one sector of one of the most well-known comedy troupes in the UK comedy circuit. It's the one and only Neil Mullarkey.
Hello. Yes, I'm one-fifth of the Comedy Store players, alongside Josie Lawrence, Richard Branch, Lee Simpson, and Ruth Bratt. And so we've been performing, actually, it's our 40th anniversary, can you believe, in October 2025. But as well as those five, we have a multitude of guests who've played with us over the years, comedians, actors, pianists. And so we wouldn't have lasted this long without the help of others and the support of the Comedy Store in London.
Yeah. And so let's start at the very beginning because Julie Andrews always says it's a good place to start. I agree with her, unless she really is angry, and I wouldn't agree with her. But she can't sing, so she wouldn't be able to sing that anyway. How did you get into the wonderful world of comedy?
I was in the school play. I was doing my A levels, physics, chemistry, maths. I thought I wanted to be a doctor. That sounds good, doesn't it? But then I was in the school play by Tom Stoppard, The Real Inspector Hound. I got laughs. It was addictive. I thought I want to do this. I had a sneaking suspicion that if I went to Cambridge, I might get in the footlights because that's where they did comedy. And I did. Hugh Laurie, Stephen Thompson, Emma Thompson, Stephen Fry were there. And I managed, because I wrote a sketch and they liked it, let me perform it in a show, and I became on the Footlights Committee. I didn't tell my parents until I was on the committee. My dad said, is this what you want to do as a job? I said, yes. And he said, okay, because he'd always said, don't just study to get a job, study what you like, what you enjoy, which of course was fine to do in the 70s and 80s. But now nobody can get a job. There's no prospects for anyone at all. We all have to do computing and electronics, don't we? Or something, or nursing or medicine. I don't know. But I just decided I'm going to do economics and social science. But I got into the Footlights and then we went on tour to Australia and around the UK and I got my equity card, Tom. That's the thing that actors need to be able to get on the telly or go in the West End. And I got it. And then I met a man called Mike Myers
Yeah.
selling tickets for a show I was in. Ask me another question.
Yeah. And do you reckon that the footlights were so important because of the names that were in it, or do you reckon that it was important because it was a good stepping stone that people were recognised?
All of the above. We were very fortunate to have an established club where people who wanted to write and perform comedy would go. So it attracted people with talent. Once we got into the show, we were able to sell tickets in Cambridge. So we got the chance to practice our skill, craft, art. Actually, the Cambridge Footlights motto is Ars Celere Artem Est. The art is to hide the art. And then we went on tour and we went to Edinburgh. None of those things could we have done if it hadn't been for the people before us. So we were just on the shoulders of giants, really, because of Monty Python and Beyond the Fringe. People had heard of the Footlights, so they were prepared to go to theatres around the country and Edinburgh to see a show, whoever these schmucks were, because of their predecessors. And we went to Australia because of the people before us. So we were very fortunate to be able to get audiences, but also because there was that discipline we'd learned from other people that this has got to play not just to a student audience.
Yeah.
This has got to run for 2 weeks at the Arts Theatre in Cambridge, 650 seater, and it's got to appeal not just to late night review sketch type folk. It's got to be really better than that. So we had a professional director for the summer review and it went on tour. So those are all things that gave you the confidence, but also there was a training. We didn't just think we were funny. We had to survive trying sketches out in an underground cellar, then in the student theatre, then in the main theatre in Cambridge. So I would say we were fortunate to learn our craft.
Yeah.
But um, I know people think, oh, Footlights, they're lucky. But of course, once we'd left, we then had to make our own way. And I was fortunate again because Mike Myers was selling tickets for shows in because he'd heard of Footlights because of Monty Python Beyond the Fringe. And he was perhaps one of the luckiest things that has ever happened to me. A bloke with enormous talent, prepared to teach me improv, prepared to do a double act with me. And with Paul Merton, Kit Hollaback, Dave Cohen, we started the Comedy Store Players Sunday Night Improv in 1985. Can you imagine that, Tom? We're doing a show with no script. Crazy.
And one of the things you've done off the back of that is, what was it like appearing in two Austin Power films?
Well, it was great fun. I'll tell you the story. Basically, Mike Myers did Wayne's World, and that was a great hit.
Yeah,
Then next summer he said, I don't want to do Wayne's World 2 because I'm trying something different. So he did a movie called So I Married an Axe Murderer. And when I spoke to him in about April, he said, we might have Sharon Stone. We're definitely going to change the title. We'll definitely have this A-list director. Then he rang me a few weeks later saying, we can't get Sharon Stone, different director. Actually, he's called Tommy Schlomme or Thomas Schlomme, who then went on to be one of the creators of West Wing.
yeah,
Um, and he rang and said, can you be in Los Angeles on Friday? I was actually on holiday in France at the time. I said, okay, my flight arrives Friday morning from France. I've got to go home, have a shower, and I'll suspend my preparations for my Edinburgh show that year. So this is 1992. I was thinking of doing a one-man show called Memoirs of Lord Naughty. Um, anyway, so he said, can you help with rewrites? I went there, landed there was a guy called Rodney King who was beaten up by LA police,
yeah,
but the police were let off in Orange County courthouse by the jury. LA descended into riots, smoke in the air, helicopter. We were trying to write comedy, so I helped him with this rewrite. So I married an ex-murderer. Um, so I was kind of got to know we Hollywood a bit.
yeah,
We kept in touch. He did Wayne's World 2 the next summer, which did really well. And then he was kind of looking for what next to do. He'd left Saturday Night Live. He was saying, I've got this script, which, it kind of shows the kind of humor I wants to do. I said, send it to me. He sent it to me. Austin Powers. I said, this is great. This is funny. This is James Bond meets Carry On. And for Mrs. Kensington, you must have this great actress called Elizabeth Hurley. She's funny, but she fits, that sort of poshish, English, beautiful woman that you need for that character. Then he eventually said, well, there's a part for you. Can you get over for one day? All right, you can stay at my house. And it was for a character who was giving back to Austin Powers all his stuff that he put in the 60s while he was being cryogenically frozen. And so he'd missed a lot of cultural changes. And so I gave him the stuff. So his tie-dyed socks, his Cuban heel boots, his Burt Bacharach record. And he said to Elizabeth Hurley, no, no, this sort of thing ain't my bag, baby. And then I said, produced a credit card signed by him. Then a warranty, no, no, nothing to do with me. This sort of thing ain't my bag, baby. So he was looking very embarrassed. So I just had to be kind of supercilious, straight faced, looking down my nose at this guy. So Jay Roach, great director, because he helped create the right thing on set, the right feeling that Mike could do the script, then play and improvise, and we'd all have to not giggle. So I basically did that in about 2 hours. And then Austin Powers 3, some years later, flown in, hotel, business class, very grand. Did my scene, which was a little bit longer, but now 2 weeks because it was quite complicated
yeah,
in LA. So those are the reasons I'm in Austin Powers because I met Mike
yeah.
because he was selling tickets for a show I was in. We kept in touch. We did a double act. He went to Saturday Night Live, made movies, but still remembered his old friend from London and brought me into those movies.
Yeah. And why do you reckon that the films were so successful, not just in America, but on a global scale.
because they were silly. It's interesting because actually he told me the test screenings, they do test screenings, see how the audience gets it, and they kind of how much money should we put into publicity? Because a lot of the publicity budget can often be bigger than the budget of the actual film.
Yeah,
Um, didn't test very well in Los Angeles. They tested. It was kind of clear that the audience wasn't so into James Bond and Carry On,
mm,
but of course, the global audience did like the silly. They
yeah,
knew James Bond and they knew the silly, sort of teasing male toxicity, if you like, or that kind of all those things that you do in James Bond. And just by saying hello, then women will fall at your feet, which we all know is true uh, in James Bond movies, at least. And so I think the reason it resonated, of course, it resonated hugely in America
yeah,
because they got the silly, verbally funny, clever visuals,
mm,
um, taking the Mickey out of well-known movie cliches.
yeah,
So I think that's why they liked it because and also you had these two characters because we all love Dr. Wicked, don't we?
yeah,
I think you're a bit of a Dr. Wicked, Tom. You're trying to take over the world through podcasts.
yeah,
Am I right? I think I am. And in a way, I said this to Mike, and he said, "Yeah, a lot of my friends say to me that I'm a bit Austin Powers, a bit kind of naive and boyish, and trying to do my best, and a bit Doctor Wicked, planning, conniving, taking over the world through silly comedy." Because Mike is very hardworking,
yeah,
so comedy looks like it's easy, doesn't it?
yeah,
Except it's not. You have to write it, you have to perform it, you have to direct it, you have to edit the movie, and you can spend a long time not knowing if it's right
yeah,
or trying to find what is right. The words, the notion, the story, the prop,
mm,
etc. So he works really hard. So when I did work with him initially, I was doing a job.
yeah,
The only job I've ever proper had, really, working for the Housing Benefit Department at Wandsworth Borough Council for 6 weeks. Um, and I'd go there at 6 o'clock and we worked till midnight. Mike wouldn't let me go home till I'd finished re-rehearsing the sketch. One of his friends lived upstairs and she was an actor and director. So we bring her down, she'd be in her dressing gown, and Mike would say, "What do you think of this sketch?" And she'd say, "This is funny, this is funny. Is it funny enough? Is that funny?" And so, because he really works it, like it's almost like maths with Mike, constructing it. So that's why I think they were funny because they were very well planned to look spontaneous, perhaps.
yeah. And one of the other things you've done is seen. Well, I think you've seen as a like it's a legacy, shall we say? That's going to be the word I'm going to use. It's a legacy of how long it's lasted because it's still on Radio 4 to this very day. What was it like being a guest on Sorry I Haven't a Clue?
Oh, that's great fun. I'm sorry I haven't the clue. It's been around for a long time, and what's great about it is that it's something that started, I don't know, maybe 70s. It was from a a radio sketch show called I'm Sorry, I Read That Again.
Yeah,
So some ex-Footlights people like Bill Oddie, Tim Brooke Taylor, Graham Garden, and Joe Kendall. And it was then they thought, this is quite hard work writing. I'm putting words in their mouth. Kind of, let's do a panel show that kind of takes the mickey out of all panel shows. So it won't need quite as much writing, except what's clever about it is it creates interesting ideas, silly questions, silly structures. For example, singing the wrong lyrics to another song. What a great idea that is. The late arrivals, etc. So Graham Garden kind of came up with it, but then it was revitalized by a man called John Naismith, who was a BBC Radio 4 producer, who said, first of all, let's take it on tour. Let's take it out of London. Let's take it out of the radio theatre, take it in theatres. And he's also overseen how it's translated to the new generation. So every generation, there's more women on it now. Brilliant performers who can sing and those who can't sing, which is often funnier. Um, how do we bring it to a new audience? So Humphrey Lyttelton was brilliant. Jack Dee, of course, has taken that in his way. And so it's cleverly constructed so that the Humphrey Lyttelton script was written
yeah,
by a guy called Ian Patterson, who was a brilliant writer. And he had suggestions for the kind of rounds they might do, the kind of questions. So I would say it was a real privilege to be on that. My dad is the one who kind of made me want to do comedy because when he was laughing, his whole body laughed.
Yeah,
So he would say, "Come on, come on, it was lunchtime." But no, it's Saturday lunchtime. Listen to the Goons, because that's what he grew up on.
yeah,
And then it was, I'm sorry, I haven't a clue. And his whole body would rock and lift up and down. I thought, that's power. If you can make my dad do that, wouldn't it be great? So sorry, I haven't a clue is something that, anybody aspires to who's done comedy. Um, and what what I remember about it was it's kind of working quite hard to think about what you might say for some of the stuff you can plan,
yeah.
and then just going with the flow for what you can't.
Yeah, and I think that when you have because there's a lot of brilliant comedians and the comedy world has expanded. So I think that when they have like guests like Rachel Paris on it, it then just becomes like obviously she's gonna be really good at the singing because that's her forte, but then it makes it funny because you don't know what she's gonna say. You know she'll smash it in the she'll know the tune and she'll be able to match it right, but you wouldn't know clue what she's gonna say, so you'll end up still wetting yourself laughing.
Well, I'm sorry you've been wetting yourself, but Rachel Paris is a brilliant performer, writer, musician. She often guests with the Comedy Store Players, and it's a joy to play with her. But she has also a major part in a thing called Ostentatious, improvised Jane Austen. She does shows. So she's very, very good. And it's great to see her in Sorry, I haven't a clue. Because again, she brings something different. What's joyous about it? So Pippa Evans is another person who plays with the Comedy Store Players, brilliant musician, brilliant improviser, character comic as well. And she again slightly different from Rachel, from me, from Tony Hawk's, and she's part of Showstopper, the musical. And Ruth Bratt is in that as well, one of the mainstays of that, and she's one of the Comedy Store Players. So you now have this just amazing array of brilliant improvisers. When I started doing this, I didn't know what I was doing, and there were not many people. The Comedy Store Players was it. Apart from Jim Sweeney, Steve Steen, who'd been doing many shows for years, and then they did the Rupert Pupkin Collective at the Donmar Warehouse. But there wasn't much else. There certainly wasn't what you call long form, so narrative. So Ostentatious, they do a Jane Austen based on an audience suggestion. Showstopper is a musical. There's other ones, so criminal improv. There's an improvised Shakespeare. People are coming up with all sorts of different things. But it's great you remember Rachel because again, she she just has this kind of interesting way of she says something you think that was so funny, but her face was very straight faced, which makes it all the more funny.
Yeah, and one of the other things you've worked on is fantastic. Is fantastic. I'm trying to swerve around the obvious pun here. It's fantastic. And what would you like working on of and on absolutely?
Ah, absolutely, yes. So those are my friends. So Morwenna Banks and John Doherty, John Sparks, Pete Bakey, Murray Hunter, Gordon Kennedy. I knew them because they were doing the Edinburgh Fringe around the same time as me. I did a show with John Sparks and Morwenna many, many times with Morwenna as well. So we kind of knew them. And I always used to go and watch the recordings of their shows. And there was one time they said, "Can you come? We need a crowd." So, can you turn up? We'll give you breakfast at this place about 7:30 in the morning. And it was to be crowd, they wanted a bunch of people. So they got all their friends. We used to play football on a Friday morning, a lot of comedians and actors. So you bunch come along. And so I knew my job, be in the background, holding a placard saying, "What do we want? We don't know. When do we want it? Quite soon, please." That was it, the kind of non-committal crowd scene. But I decided it'd be fun. So I had this hat I bought from a joke shop, big sort of Orson Welles hat and a cape. And I entered the coach that day saying, "Darling, are they ready for me? Is my makeup looking good? I'm ready for my scene." And so playing a kind of over the top actor to play a crowd, an extra background artist. So they sometime later wrote me in to various scenes one evening, just coming into scenes and doing that really. Which is enormous. I think, did I bring my own hat? I can't remember, but it was just fun to come along and just do that. And darlings, I love you. That comedy over the top actor, which we all love. So Toast of London
yeah,
so we say, inhabits that sphere as well, which is actors are just but too full of themselves, have no self-consciousness. So that was it, but absolutely. But I was, as a fan, I used to go and watch the recordings and then kind of muscled my way in as a tiny part for one episode.
yeah. And do you reckon that it shows that comedy is endless when there's all this good comedy about because no one you can't say to one person, "Oh, why do you not like that?" Do you reckon that that's why comedy is so endless because there's always different types of avenues into the world of comedy?
Yeah, comedy's not going to run out. AI so far can't do comedy. It can do puns quite slowly and some sort of comedy looking things, but human beings still have this, and we're endlessly inventive, not just in comedy. So there'll be ways that we'll laugh we don't even think of now. Yes, tastes have changed, references have changed. We know the kind of places we don't want to go. Not that I ever wanted to go there anyway, frankly, if you know what I mean. But now anybody can do comedy, put it on social media because cameras are cheap, phones are cheap, editing's cheap, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. There's easy ways of sending your material out there. Because when I started, you had to do shows at Edinburgh that you might get on Radio 4. There were four channels on TV. Now there's endless possibilities, and I love watching this stuff. It's just silly people, young enough to be my grandchildren doing stuff. Silly always works. Visual comedy works. Um, the other day I saw a showcase, a comedian of 25, and he was just brilliant. Pace, timing, material, awareness, referencing stuff
Yeah,
now. That's what I liked. Um, and even I understood it. But comedy is endless.
yeah,
And you're right, there's much more of it now. And there'll be certain things I don't like, you don't like, she doesn't like. That's fine. But there's so much short bits, long bits, movies. Probably now we're all a bit used to seeing a 90-second thing, and that's kind of about as long as we can take, I guess. But I find Monty Python coming out on my Instagram feed, and it's still funny.
mm, yeah. And one of the things you've worked on, or been on, shall we say, that should return because the and I'm probably going to get this in the wrong order, but I think the earlier format did return for the 40th anniversary of Channel 4. But what was it like working on Saturday Live?
But again, it was one of those things where um, I was called in. Nick Hancock and I
Mm,
were doing this bit where we dressed up in flared trousers and said, let's bring back the 1970s. Tom, you'll have no idea what I'm talking about, but saying all the good TV shows, bring back flared trousers and wide collars, which actually have come back. It all started when I was on tour with the Footlights, and Nick Hancock was in the cast. He'd gone to Bury St Edmunds, that's where we're playing. The Theatre Royal there is the most beautiful theatre. He'd gone to the market that day and found a sort of cheap record, vinyl
yeah,
of TV themes, put it on the record player, the house we were staying, and started acting them out and was hilarious. So Hawaii Five-O, which is their rowing, and there was a TV show called Ironside, who was a detective who was in a wheelchair. So Nick did this, and then Dad's Army. So we that was our bit, which always went well. So 3 minutes at the beginning, 3 minutes at the end of acting out TV themes.
yeah,
And people had seen this, so they called us in and said, "Can you do a sort of truncated version, of that, probably 3 or 4 minutes of that?" And so they had to get permissions for the music. We had to bring our props in, and they made some as well. But what was particularly good was the director, who's called Jeff Posner, a legend. Victoria Wood, all sorts of TV shows. And what he did there was he watched us do this and realized that in the theater, it's you can see what's going on. In television, there are certain things you've got to see that, then that, so
yeah,
that. Otherwise, you give the joke away.
yeah,
So you can't just shoot it wide, because you've got to see close up. For example, Mission Impossible,
yeah.
where there's a fuse going across the screen like that. So we had a cheap indoor cracker thing that I would like. Sometimes it wouldn't like because the match it got a bit wet. Anyway, so you wanted to see the lighter, then the cracker thing. So he directed it brilliantly, so the TV audience would see things in the right order, and that's why I talk about maths and comedy. They need to see this, then that. If they see this, then that, it's not as funny. So
yeah,
it's like timing and constructing a joke. On screen, it's just harder to get the grammar right. So he spent a long, long time doing that. Anyway, what I will say is that it went fantastically well. So you had to do it live. So that's real pressure. But Harry Anfield said that's gone funnier than anything ever on this show because it was of its time. The audience were still people who remembered the 70s from their childhood, and just playing the songs made us feel good. Grange Hill, things that probably some of your older viewers might remember. And we did funny sort of piss takes of the visuals on it. So it went really well, but it was kind of weird because you had top bands there and you had Ben Elton and Stephen Fry and Hugh Laurie and Harry Enfield doing his characters. And then it was one of those appointment TV things. Everybody wanted to watch that show. Certainly any comedian wanted to be on it. So, and it was live. That was the thing. I'm talking about Jeff Posner directing. It's hard enough me remembering my props, but he's directing, he's vision, and there's a vision mixer, cut, cut, cut. And we might not do it the same way as in rehearsal, but I think we did. So he had to be very, very sensitive to that. And again, the audience was live. Could they be relied on to laugh where you thought they would laugh? So that was amazing.
yeah. And do you reckon that doing that type of material would work now, or do you reckon that because not many, not many TV shows still have the theme tunes that were once like 30, 40 seconds long? Do you reckon that that routine would still work?
I don't know. I think I see similar things. So, for example, I'll mention her name, Susan Harrison. Her Instagram is Susan Harrison Comedy. She's got an enormous number of wigs and moustaches, and she will do little sketches based on TV shows like Traitors and whatever.
Yeah,
So I think it's those bits because I noticed now with TV theme that you're right, the music isn't there, and also at the end it cuts to what the next thing is, the next episode. And for me, I want to watch the credits and hear the music. So I think that you may be right. That may be not a thing, but people certainly know the visuals and the music. So adverts, movies, some TV bits. There is still plenty of room for a recognized thing and then take the Mickey out of it.
yeah,
Something that takes itself very seriously and then do a silly version. That's always going to be fine. But your point about cultural references, yes, they have changed. It's rare that a TV show is watched by everybody.
yeah,
It's rare that a movie is seen by everyone. Whereas Star Trek, Star Wars, when I was a lad, we all kind of knew the reference. We all watched Hawaii Five O. We all watched Kojak. We all watched Dad's Army. Um, and so I think there are still shared references, but maybe the market is segmented, dare I say, Tom. And what's interesting about TikTok and Instagram and Reels is we kind of find the thing we like, and there's endless possibilities once you've found that, you know, that channel, if you like, for things that seem to pick up your interests.
yeah. And one of the other things you've done in your career that I would say is as impressive as everything because it's well, theatre is the birthing home of where things begin. Without theatre, you wouldn't have radio or TV because no one would think entertainment worth it. But what was it like working on the stage show then again?
Okay, then again, that was at the Lyric Hammersmith in London with Sheila Hancock, an icon, enormously famous, yes, but also she's been, she must be 90 by now. She was there in the 60s. She was doing movies. She was doing radio. She was doing Whitehall uh, farces type things, reviews in the 50s, 60s, and then she's still on television and radio acting, and even on, I think, Just a Minute, for example. So, total icon. Dawn French, of course, somebody I hugely admired and got to know. And, she's a lovely person, very generous performer as well. And Desmond Barrett, to pick up on your stage, a highly accomplished stage actor.
yeah,
So the four of us, it was called Then Again, directed by Neil Bartlett, who had written many theatre shows and directed highly accomplished, including the Perrier Award winner by Théâtre de Complicité, More Bigger Snacks Now, which was a brilliant, brilliant show because they were very mimey in those days, just visual comedy that would just have you howling with laughter. And there were a bunch of writers. So Neil was trying to create that thing that happened decades before, where a review, a sketches and songs would work in the theatre rather than just on the telly and radio, perhaps as it then evolved. So we had all sorts of Stephen Fry writing, Richard Curtis, as well as other writers who perhaps were less known doing radio, television stuff. And it was great fun, basically, to do that. Get to learn from Sheila, Des, and Dawn and how committed they were.
yeah,
I did a thing, a kind of monologue by N.F. Simpson, who was writing in the 50s and 60s, kind of very surreal, weird stuff, and which was very funny. This predated
yeah,
Monty Python, probably about the same time as the Goons, maybe. So they were trying to bring back some old stuff and some, as I say, contemporary writers. So that was a joy to be, as you say, in the theatre because without theatre, we wouldn't have so many great performers,
yeah,
great actors
yeah.
who've gone on to be international stars, Emmy, Oscar winners, etc. So we neglect theatre at our peril.
Yeah. And do you reckon that having award shows such as the Olivier's and the Tonys are helpful for the theatre industry because they're not only saying these people are amazing, well done, you deserve it, but it also shows to an audience that people need the theatre because it's not just oh glitz and glamour, it's more hard work and a lot of effort.
Well, it is a lot of effort, and I say see a good theatre show, I would say it's more satisfying than great television or film. It's much harder to get a great theatre show. You're in the same room as the actors. You can smell them almost. So I think Tony's and Olivier's, that's a great idea because it brings people's awareness of theatre. So don't just go and see a show because somebody off the telly or movies is in it. Go and see a show because you've heard of it and you may not know the work or the actors or the writer, but it's won an award. So it's sure, yeah, it's a great way of bringing to a wider audience the possibilities that theatre can offer, which isn't just here's not quite as good a thing as you might enjoy in the cinema. It's a different experience, more visceral, harder to get right, but when it is right, it's brilliant.
Yeah, because it's one of those things that, and you can tell over the last few years that theatre has now become, it's more exploded. You hear more about theatre shows now on like Sunday brunch or all these early morning programs than you did probably like 5 or 10 years ago because actors are going, oh, I really do love the theatre. Or you've got like certain actors that only do theatre work. So when they're on a program, they're doing the best to promote the thing in the world. And I think that that's really good for the medium of theatre because it's like radio, audio dramas are helping save the radio platform. So I think that in the end, like a cycle, everything's going to come back around and everything will be back in popularity.
Well, I don't know because I'm glad you recognise the value of theatre. At tough times when councils and the Arts Council and so forth have limited budgets, do we give money to the theatre or do we help sort of more day-to-day issues? I don't know. I think the theatre is something that should be valued. I'm glad you're aware of it as a young person and who's studying, theatre and studying film, TV, radio. Uh, but I wonder if younger people do want to go to the theatre because it might sound a bit fuddy-duddy. I hope that new ways of bringing people to the theatre are being explored. I
Yeah,
think it's endlessly inventive in terms of the material, the writing, the staging. Because frankly, theatre is basically just watching some people talk or do something, or not even talk or dance. I haven't seen You, Me, Bum Bum Train, for example, which is sounds absolutely brilliant. It's immersive theatre. I can't wait. Everyone says it's the best theatre experience they've had in their life. And in many ways, that may be the future, which is kind of immersive. Actually, go to a building that's not a theatre, be part of something. People are saying being a volunteer on that is great because they're part of the crowd that then reacts with the actor. Nobody's telling me exactly what it is, other than it's amazing.
yeah,
Anyway, I think there's new forms of theatre, and I'm hoping that the people uh, of your generation are still interested in theatre. And it certainly seems to me that every actor kind of feels they either learnt their craft in theatre,
yeah,
or if they haven't, they need to go to theatre to show they really are an actor.
yeah,
We can see that now. Hollywood actors, movie, TV actors want to come to the stage to show I can do it for real.
yeah,
It isn't just I can do a 5 second take and the director makes me look good. And of course, I love doing theatre myself. What I do is theatre, improvised theatre. We ask the audience for suggestions, we make it up there and then. We do film it and put out clips, but you don't get the same thing
yeah.
from watching it on telly. It's so wonderful to be in the same room as other people and as the actors.
Yeah, and going off on a tangent slightly, but you mentioned how immersive theatre is becoming a big thing, and I heard the other week that China, and I know it seems odd this, but China are massive fans of Inside Number Nine, and they've got their own version of Inside Number Nine on the stage, and it's immersive. So one of the shows, so they adapt some of the episodes. And one of them, to watch it, you have to stand in a box, in a cardboard box, with a small little like letterbox type slit, and you have to watch it through the letterbox to be able to see what's going on. And that's the whole show. You stood there for an hour whilst they're on a moving train, so you're in this carriage.
Well,
What?
that sounds brilliant. That sounds fab. Uh, why not? That sounds. I think Inside Number Nine is coming to the West End in London soon, so that'd be interesting to see how they bring it to the stage.
Yeah. And so, one of the things that you're currently involved in, so your current line of endeavor is the correct term I'm going to use. Um, where did the idea of your books come from in the first place?
Well, my most recent book was called In the Moment, Build Your Confidence, Creativity, and Communication. Because for 25 years, I've been teaching the skills of improv to people in jobs, in business, in organizations, public sector, private sector, leadership, negotiation, teamwork, collaboration, creativity. They're all helped by the simple
Yeah,
approach of improv theatre, which isn't how can I make jokes? It's how can I listen to what she said? How can she build on what I've
mm,
said? We very much are about listening, creating theatre in the moment, yes, and as an attitude rather than yes, but being humble, living with vulnerability, living with not knowing, being happy to co create, being happy to make somebody else look good. These are all the things we have as the improv ethos, and
yeah,
they're readily applicable to anybody who has to do any kind of job. So listening rather than going, this is what I want to say, sticking to your script, if you like, and she's saying that, no, no, this is what I'm saying. Okay, how do we work together? And so that's the thing that I've been teaching for 25 years now. Very simple, treating what somebody says as an offer to build upon.
yeah,
Even if they say what you didn't expect, you might feel it's a block. It's not what I wanted. But actually, can I go with them? Can they go with me? And we create something that neither of us expected. And so that's the improv mindset. So that's what I teach. I also teach when you need not to do that occasionally. You need to have a script and plans and budgets and be prepared. For example, when you're giving a presentation. So in the theatre, actors need to know their lines.
yeah,
Good. Director needs to get it right, as it were. But actually, even that is an evolving thing because tomorrow night try something different. Whereas improv theatres make it up now. It's very much in the moment. And in life, if you're in a job, there are times when you want to be in the improv thing. Let's listen. I didn't know what you were thinking. Tell me more about that. Let's explore avenues versus, okay, this is the plan, this is the structure, this is the budget. And of course, I do say to people, you've got to be doing kind of often those in tandem. It's not always either or, it's almost one, then one, then one, because actually the comedy store players, of which I'm part, We improvise, but we know we'll start at 7:30. We know the comedy stores organize tickets, drinks, food, insurance, security.
yeah,
We finish at 9:30. We know who's in the show. We have a running order, who's in which bit. But when we get on stage, we're totally open to whatever the audience gives us. So it's kind of opening up people's possibilities of collaborating, of creating where sometimes you haven't been there before.
yeah,
So this bit is I've been here before, I've done the job, let's stick to a plan. And then, oh, things are changing. We can't stick to the old script. We've got to go new because things are changing and they are changing all the time.
yeah,
The only the only certainty is change, Tom. And the fact is that all of the technical things are changing with AI, working from home, certain things we don't need to do anymore, certain things we need to understand how to do them better. And improv says, oh, the things have changed. Let's use that to move forward
yeah,
rather than go, oh no, things have changed. I'm not going to change at all myself.
yeah,
And so the improv thing is about involving people, listening to ideas from not just the most senior person, being open to trying stuff out, running pilots, prototyping, acknowledging you maybe got it wrong, um, trying to involve even the quieter voice. Perhaps people who don't know how to do stuff
yeah,
will be great creators because they don't know what you're not allowed to do. Uh, the improv mindset is very open and acknowledging of failure, vulnerability, humble, but really attentive. There's an opportunity there. Oh, great. Hadn't thought of that. Well, I'm not sure where it's going to go quite, but let's go together on that journey. So that's my passion now. So
yeah,
95% of my life now is doing that kind of work,
yeah.
coaching individuals, keynote speeches at conferences or small group workshops. I still do the comedy store players. That's the only showbiz I do now.
Yeah, and you mentioned about how improvisation helps with change, and I think that when you play the games where you start the scene off and someone else comes in and then does a whole U-turn and it's now it might be about a bodybuilder, but now it might be about a shopkeeper that's secretly selling like trees. Not everyone likes change. And I think doing improvisation helps to say that change isn't always a bad thing like in this, for example. And do you reckon that that's why improvisation is so important to the society that we now live in?
Yeah, I particularly talk about improv because it's this thing that started 100 years ago, actually, with a social worker helping children in Chicago. And it was her son who then set up Second City, who do improv, Second City Theatre in Chicago, from whom many people have gone to Saturday Night Live, not least Mike Myers. So improv, which is about yes and building. So it's not just everyday improvisation. Oh, let's see what happens. Let's just hang out. It's kind of a mindset which is pay attention to what's happening, with intention to build on the data, on the reality, on her perspective, on your difference. We can co-create, and things are changing all the time. So I heard only yesterday an academic called Ronald Heifetz from Harvard Business School. He said people don't dislike change. It's if it's change they've had a hand in creating, they're happy to go with it. If it's you must change imposed from on high, and the improv mindset is exactly, we're going to co-create the change. We have an open agenda. We may have some guide rails, as we call them, um, but within certain frameworks, we can be open and challenge the status quo a little while acknowledging that if you throw everything out, it's
Yeah,
foolish. So what's working well? Let's build on that.
yeah. And do you reckon that improv in itself will outlast a lot of things because it's not just trapped into a box. It could be the endlessness of a box. It could be whatever you think. And do you reckon that why that's gonna last longer than some other areas of the world of performing?
Well, it definitely will last. It's a very simple idea, really.
Yeah,
Listening to the other person. That can go on forever, and it's been going on forever anyway. We just call it improv now, from the 1950s. But Commedia dell'arte had that sort of thing. They would have some stock characters, but they'd make up plots as they go. So the ethos will continue.
yeah,
Yes, definitely.
yeah. And I think that what has helped, I think, show that improv is more than what people's ideas of it is, to make it show that it can be anything. I think is was the invention of both TV and radio and international versions of Whose Line Is It Anyway? Because I think that that as a show worked really well in the UK, worked really well in America, and did okay in Australia. I know it didn't really land that well in Australia, but it did all right in Australia. Do you reckon that it's because people enjoy watching silliness? Do you reckon that's why the format has worked not just in the UK and America,
Yeah.
but places like Australia?
Definitely, yeah, because it's just silly because my nieces and nephews would watch it on Dave in the early 2000s, even though it had been shot in the 80s and early 90s, it wasn't topical. We didn't mind them having mullets and 80s clothes because it's generally silly. You can see what's going on. You see, she said that, oh, he doesn't know what to say. He said this. That's gonna outlast anything, I would say. So yeah, it's internationally and available. In fact, improv happens in many, many
Yeah,
countries. There's all sorts of forms, theatre, sports, and others. That it's even the other day I heard in Saudi Arabia,
yeah.
which there's improv in Saudi Arabia. Who knew? Exciting times.
Wow. I never thought I would hear the words comedy and Saudi Arabia in the same sentence. Like, it's
Well,
mind blowing.
it's my belief that comedy exists everywhere,
Yeah, yeah. And do you reckon? And
whether or not it's sanctioned, but people are always able to mutter and take the mickey out, and that's a sign of a good society when we can laugh at our politicians.
yeah. And do you reckon that's why Whose Line Is It Anyway can just air all the time, no matter what year it is, because it's not tied down to some political thing like, for instance, Mock the Week. That does air on Dave, but because they've made a reference to the fact that this might be on Dave, that's all right. But do you reckon that Whose Line Is It Anyway? It works in itself because it reruns on Rewind TV every day, every hour, probably on right now, probably.
Really? Okay. Well, yeah, because it's timeless. It's not tied to a particular time.
Yeah,
Mock the Week is generally topical, so it will look of its time.
yeah,
Whose Line isn't tied to any particular time. Improv isn't. And so generally people, when they come and see our show,
yeah,
they'll say that was warm comedy because
yeah,
we were taking the mickey out of ourselves, really. We weren't saying, look at those people. Uh, let's look down on them. It's kind of, oh, look at me, I'm
yeah,
useless. And it's timeless. We don't really do political jokes. We might make a tiny reference to something that's in the ether now, but we're not doing satire. That's what people are surprised by. They think we're going to do current stand-up comedy. We don't. We leave that to the stand-ups. They'll do their thing. We leave that to the topical shows, of which
yeah,
there are many. We just mostly do kind of domestic scenes or sci-fi or Jane Austen or Agatha Christie or something where it's kind of not particularly tied
yeah.
to any time or political viewpoint.
Yeah. And I think that you can do pretty much anything. And the one thing that I'm gonna say, due to the fact that I found this the other day, is that the Golden Girls, which is a comedy of its time because not many of them are left, someone's now writing a murder mystery book where the Golden Girls are detectives. It's a cozy Golden Girls murder about some murder to do with cheese, and the book looks about that thing. And I think that shows that comedy can work with anything because nowhere else would you get cheese, murder mystery, and the Golden Girls.
Well, I must say, I'm a big fan of cheese. Whenever I don't know what to say, I'll just say cheese. So I'm glad that they've involved it. And in fact, a speechwriter said if he's stuck, he might say mention cheese. So, but also you've done an enormous amount of watching. Well, for you, Tom, to mention Golden Girls, you must spend all your time just researching and watching and listening to comedy.
Yeah, I got so many DVDs they couldn't fit in this room. I had to carve that. Well, I didn't carve it out myself; it was already built. But there's another room full of DVDs and VHSs because I've got a VHS player that's plugged in because we've got a TV that works with VHS players, and I've got other VHSs that way. I've got too much time on my hands, it seems.
You have. Well, I think I might have some show reels of VHS upstairs. I used to, and I've certainly got DVDs that I can't quite let go, even though we don't have a DVD player, because I bought them and I cherish them like a record. I've even got a U-matic, which was I think 1 inch tape that they used to broadcast television from. And when I was a thing called O1 for London in the 80s, it was kind of topical culture news.
Yeah,
And they'd often finished editing it about half an hour before it went out at 11 o'clock. And they had to take it from the edit studio to the broadcast place, Thames TV. And you couldn't take it on the tube because the magnetic of the rails would affect the tape. Can you imagine that now? So they had to take it in a cab or walk it up. So, and I still got one of those because my show reels on it. Heaven knows if that ends up in groundful, what'll happen to it. But I'm glad you've got all those things and the wherewithal to watch them. So good for you. I hope you're going to. Are you doing a dissertation on something or other, Tom?
not yet because I'm only in my second half of my second year.
Right, because
I'll probably
you're just a font of knowledge. There should be the Mason Museum or something because you know so much across such a broad range, which you shouldn't ought to at your age.
yeah, I've got the mind of an 80-year-old, but the body of a 12-year-old.
And they both want them back.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. They want. Yeah, because I'm very small. I might look tall, but I'm very small. There's some 6-year-olds that are taller than me. It
Well,
gets
you're about that tall as far as I can tell. You're about 2 inches tall.
yeah, yeah. I'm only slightly taller than that. And so, as we come towards the end of the interview, this is your opportunity to tell people where can they find you without giving away your home address. Where can people track you down?
Well, come and see me with the Comedy Store Players. I'm there most Sundays. The players are there every Sunday. ComedyStorePlayers.com. ComedyStorePlayers.com. Our hashtag is Comedy Store Players. If you want to find out about what I do, neilmullarkey.com. You can see the comedy I do, but also the training work I do across the world using improv and other theatre skills to help teams and leaders be better creatively, better communicators, and better collaborators, how to work better together. I'd love to see you. I'm on all of social media. You can find me there, even on LinkedIn, Tom.
Mm, yeah. Where can people track down your books?
Well, there are links on my website, neilmalarkey.com, but you can find them on Goodreads and Amazon. So I've written 4 books, actually. One was called Solitaire for Two. Hard to get that. That was a movie I was in, which was written and directed by Gary Signor, who wrote and directed Hapless, which is on Peacock, I think, and Prime. And then 7 Steps to Improve Your People Skills. And there's another one by my alter ego. His website is thesucceeder.com. And he's a motivational guru called L. Vaughan Spencer. His book is called Don't Be Needy, Be Succeedy. So if you're really keen, you can find those. But basically, if you search for Neil Mullarkey, you should find me doing something or other.
Yes. And we'll make sure we'll have the links to the correct website in the comment section in wherever it's supposed to be. I don't know the
Thank you.
jargon, but it's wherever you're supposed to see links. You'll find them so that you don't misspell and find anything else because you want the right thing, not the wrong thing. So I'm
Thank
like
you.
your fairy godmother, but I'm not
Yes.
a mother, and I'm not a fairy, and I'm a human. So I'm
Well, but you're like our fairy godmother, and all
yeah,
the Cinderellas out there will thank you for this. And so, before we finish, Tom, can I just check? Did you press record? Because
I,
your viewers might not know that this is the second interview I've done with Tom, and he's managed to ask me completely different questions from the first time. But the first time he hadn't pressed record, and I said, "Don't worry, I'll come and do it again."
yes, it has recorded, um, and it is definitely recording because I can see that it's recording.
Oh yeah, all right. Well, I'll see you in 2 weeks. We'll do it a third time.
And so there we have it. What a wonderful interview. Thank you for letting me interview you again. And thank you guys for watching. And remember, no, I've forgotten.